Hello, Iqbal. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
Thanks for having me today.
Thank you very much.
Well, we have few questions for you, and I discovered recently that you are also an expert on oil, well, all
No,
economics.
I'm not an expert. I know a little bit about oil, and
Yeah.
you know
Well,
that.
you have been drenched in oil for a few decades now, right? I mean, you know a lot about it.
No, I don't know much about oil, but I have been working with people who have oil.
All
So
right.
naturally, as a result of that,
Oil,
I
mate.
keep a very close eye on the politics of oil, and it's in my interest
That's great.
because
Yeah.
oil dictates the world politics
Okay. Yeah,
and the
that's
world
what we
economy.
want. That's what we want to know. I mean, what's really going on nowadays? I mean, oil. We say oil-rich countries, oil prices, and we tomorrow we have a strike, by the way, in Paris as
Yeah,
usual, but this time it's about fuel prices. So we'll come to that. But let's start first by OPEC and Saudi Arabia, because whenever we talk about oil, the one name which comes into mind is Saudi Arabia and Russia, of course. So yeah. Um, First question: why is oil so important? Simple question, but why? For
because
the world economy.
basically, it's hydrocarbons are the basis of the global economy. Until we find solar or wind or fusion or fusion energy, nuclear energy is quite small portion
Yeah.
of the total paradigm of global economy.
Mm.
But until we find these other sources like solar, which we think one day we will very soon, in next 10 to 20 years.
Okay.
But other than that, until such time, and until we discover electric cars
Okay.
and sustainable energy sources like sea tides energy,
Yeah.
until such time, hydrocarbons is the name of the game, and that goes back to the time when you had the first car
Yeah.
that Ford discovered and then made, or that's how it became the T model. And
Yeah.
since then, automobile industry is based on oil,
Okay.
as well as most of the energy, global energy produced is through gas or oil.
Okay.
Okay, so electric energy, and it's not hydroelectric energy. 72% of the energy produced in the world is today gas and oil, basically
Wow.
electric energy.
Okay.
So
So even the electric cars, theoretically, it would one day. I hope
yeah.
it happens. 72% of them would be charged by oil and gas.
Oil and gas.
Okay.
But then it's new technology, and
Yeah.
we are able to store energy.
Okay.
That was not the concept before. That was,
Okay.
we were discussing yesterday.
Okay.
What Tesla has done
Yeah.
is storing of the energy.
Okay. It has.
Which is very
Yeah.
important because there's a peak and off-peak hours,
Mhm.
and in off-peak hours, if you're able to store that energy, so you're saving energy.
All right.
In that
Great.
context,
Okay.
in
Great.
that context, is very good.
Okay.
So coming back to the oil is the basic form of energy through which the world moves. The GDP of the world, the gross domestic product,
Yeah.
products produced of the world GDP is based on oil, and as the major component
Yeah.
of how the global economy works
Mhm.
is oil. So that's the reason oil is very important. So if you take the component of oil out of the global economy,
Yeah.
the size of the global economy will shrink,
Wow.
and therefore we consider oil to be the main prime mover.
So that gives a lot of power to oil producing countries then, like OPEC. Well, I mean,
Of course,
we have OPEC and we have non-OPEC countries. Is that
Right.
true?
Yeah, basically.
That
we
was the
have,
difference?
We have a lot of power.
Okay.
OPEC, and as a result of that, and that power has been gradually increasing since the time that this industrial revolution has happened, and before industrial revolution or before the internal combustion engine,
Yeah.
it was basically the Archimedes wheel, or basically whale oil, and the concept was
Wow.
very different. And the total horsepower that we used to generate in the global economy was minuscule portion of what we are generating now. Therefore, the size of the global economy and the population was very little, and so was the prosperity.
Even
was
for
very little.
agriculture, right? I mean, the pesticides and everything.
Yeah, no, basically that's the reason. If you look at it, Malthusian prophecies about what's going to happen in future were based on the fact that he thought that oil will basically because the population is geometric progression
Okay.
and our resources are arithmetic progression. So he thought that this geometric progression of it's an exponential growth,
Yeah.
and we will not be able to meet the
Okay.
amount of
The demand for the food.
the amount of creativity we have and productivity we have in the agriculture field, and therefore for him always it was the horsepower or the ox power that would
Okay.
define our productivity in terms of agricultural products. So he made those prophecies, and luckily we had this calculus, as a result of which we had this internal combustion engine, as a result of which we had this industrial revolution, as a result of which we have increased exponential growth of agricultural products. So,
Okay.
basically before in 1850s and 1840s, 70% of the world population was attached to agriculture. Now, today,
Yeah.
if you look at it, only 5 or 10% of French population is attached to agriculture, and they produce 100 times more than what they were producing
True.
when they were 70% attached to
True.
farms.
Yeah.
So basically,
A lot thanks to oil.
lot of that to the harvesters and the ability
Yeah.
of mechanized agriculture as an industry, and of course, all these harvesters are basically worked
Yeah.
and they work on oil and
Okay.
other energy sources. But
Okay.
as I told you, that had it not been for the mechanized internal combustion engine and progress henceforth,
Yeah.
it would have not been possible. So
Okay.
that's the reason that all the crises had gone.
So indirectly, the oil-producing countries also control our food. Then, I mean,
No, oil producing countries don't control, they only control the production of oil.
Okay.
And naturally, as such, they have their very big leverage
That's
on
true.
the global economy.
Like Saudi Arabia, for example.
No, not Saudi Arabia on its own, but there was a time when Saudi Arabia was one of the key producer, and it is at the moment
Yeah.
one of the three key producers: Russia, America, and Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia used to be the largest producer. Now America has overtaken Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Okay.
So and so has Russia. So the amount of importance Saudi Arabia has now is not the same as before.
So,
So basically, Saudi Arabia, there was a time back in the days in 1950s after the Second World War, and back 55s that oil used to be $3 a barrel, or $1.50 or $2 a barrel.
okay.
And in 1960s, it used to be $3 a barrel, and that was a time when OPEC was first formed, basically.
Okay.
And initially, OPEC was formed by Iran and Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and I think it was Venezuela. And
Alright.
it was formed in Baghdad, Iraq.
Okay.
These are the original.
And why did they form it?
originating- They wanted to be a cartel. And
Okay.
they thought that every cartel, the purpose of the cartel is to negotiate a better price. And in those days, oil used to be sold at $1.50 or $1 a barrel. So then it moved up to $3 a barrel, and it was only in 1967, after the Israeli-Arab War and Yom Kippur War,
Yeah.
that the oil embargo started as a political symbol, and all of the OPEC nations agreed to agree on an embargo, and as such, in 1967 onwards to 1971, that was a period that you have this oil embargo, and as a result, oil, quadrupled from $3 to $12.
Wow.
And that was the biggest catastrophe. And that was a time when Harold Wilson used to be in UK, and the winter of discontent, and all these issues happened and the inflation went up to 24% and the interest rates went up.
Because of
So
oil.
because of the fuel inflation and all this. It was a shock, external shock.
Uh-huh.
So they had that kind of leverage in those days because oil prices were artificially kept very low, with all due respect.
Yeah.
And so let's be honest, that was, keeping the OPEC poor was not the right strategy because oil is a limited quantity and as such should have got a better price so that consumption should have been better because wastage is very high.
Okay.
If your price is too low.
True.
So basically, it was not the market value of oil if you consider the factors, all factors taken into account. So then, since 1971-73, a war happened, and then again the oil embargo, the King Faisal famous statement that when he was threatened that I will go back to the desert. I know how to live in a desert, but basically those embargoes and oil as a political tool became very important between 60s and 70s, and then naturally that tool was led to a huge that embargo led to huge lines on the petrol pumps and it impacted the Western economies, and since then the OPEC became a very big cartel as an important cartel in context of the global economy.
Okay, so nowadays we see that the oil prices are going down again, and what's going on? Is the demand going down? Is the production going up? Because when I was younger, we were told that oil prices are only going to go up now, because the world economy is growing and China and India are growing. So, but we have seen in last, let's say, 5 years, prices go really high and then really low. From $120 it went to $30. Now we were up and now we're going down again.
See, oil, like any commodity, is very much dependent on its production, for example. And basically, it's a very good question you've asked, that oil should be going up all the time because it's not unlimited in its context, in its quantity, and it may become less over a period of time. So we have been using, there was so-called peak oil theory.
Yeah.
So this is the time
That scared many
it should
people.
be, 2015 was the time that peak oil theory suggested that oil will be in leveling off and then no new fields will be found because whatever oil had to be found has been found and it will start declining. The production will start declining whereas demand will keep going up. So they were expecting the oil to be $200 in 2015, but that has not been the case because all the predictions of future in context of oil has been wrong, because much more productions have come online and technological advances has given much more oil, and fracking has given a new leash of life to oil production at a higher cost. So basically what has happened is that since 1990, there were expectations that world economy would be needing, there were the projections, I remember that in 1989-90, that the projections were that by 2015, world would need 115 million barrel of oil a day, and therefore, in those days it used to be 85 million barrels a day.
How much is it nowadays?
It's 94 million barrels.
Okay, so we are far from 115.
So basically, nobody thought that efficiencies which have come in. You see my point? So million barrel produces a certain amount of GDP. So if you produce a million barrel of oil and you utilize it, then it should produce a certain amount of GDP. That is the standard mark. So in those days, American economy was much smaller, the world economy was much smaller. In 1990-91, the world economy
during the
was
Kuwait War,
35 or 36 trillion dollars, and they were utilizing 80 to 85 million barrel oil a day.
Okay.
You see my point? So for a small economy like that, so I remember that very clearly because I was based and working on those issues, that we were expecting that by 2015 oil demand will be, for the world economy to grow at 2.5% per annum, we were expecting that if the world economy will be around the 75 to 80 trillion dollars by this time, the amount of oil required would be around 110 to 115 million barrel a day.
Okay.
But what happened was that efficiencies kicked in. Like Malthusian revolution failed,
Yeah.
the predictions and what he thought and prophesied, that failed. All of a sudden, from 1991 onwards, and of the oil shocks and the oil embargoes,
Yeah.
people started looking at efficiencies. And as a result of that, those efficiencies, we have seen that world GDP has progressed at much faster rate, but the consumption that it utilizes oil, usage has fallen down considerably.
Okay.
So, as I told you that in 1991 it was 75 million barrel for 35 to 40 trillion dollar GDP. Now, in 2018, we have a GDP of 75 to 80 trillion dollar, double.
Nearly double.
than in last 30 years, double. But tell me how much oil we are using? 93 million barrel a day. So with only additional usage of 10 million barrel a day, or 12, 15 million barrel from 75 to 93, the world economy has doubled. So efficiency of usage of oil has become considerably much more. And that's because before, oil guzzlers,
Yeah.
the cars used to take, for example, 5 kilometer a liter or 3 kilometer a liter. Now there are 10 kilometer a liter.
Sure.
Oil guzzlers used to be
Especially the European
a gallon,
cars, yeah.
8 kilometer miles a gallon. The Chevrolets and all.
Yeah,
Now
that's
the
right.
cars have become much more efficient, and now, of course, we have got now electrical cars, and we have got much more efficient industry as a whole, and the entire industry has moved into a different gear. The air conditioning has become much more cheaper, the transportation, the rail, the LEDs.
True.
So all this, we have become a much more efficient economy. Global economy has become very efficient user of hydrocarbons, and producing at a much higher level, but much lower consumption. That was not a part of the deal.
Okay.
So as a result,
The scaremongering that we
that did not work. So that is efficiency of the oil, efficiencies through technological development has helped suppression of the oil prices. You see my point? That's
Okay.
one of these. The other issue which is very important, that on one hand we have efficient cars, efficient industry,
Yeah.
efficient programs, and less usage of oil. And as oil prices have gone up, people have been very careful of developing
Yeah.
very efficient
Transport
tools,
modes, yeah.
industrial machines. So that was one of the reasons. If imagine oil was $1 a barrel, then they would have done what they wanted. They would have never changed
True.
from oil guzzling Chevrolets
True.
to these dinkies, which
Yeah.
are really good and efficient and are much better now.
True.
So that was one of the reasons that oil. Then, as you asked me, why the oil prices are so much up and down all the time. Oil prices are very elastic in nature, in contextual terms. So the basic issue was that the capacities have also grown a lot. Like Saudi Arabia, 80% of Saudi Arabian oil wells are not even producing because they are all capped because there is not much demand. Saudi Arabia can virtually produce 30 million barrel a day.
No way.
But then oil prices will come down to 1. Basically,
Wow.
Saudi Arabia has got 300 billion barrel of oil in the ground.
Yeah.
They have 18 to 21% of the world oil reserves, and Kuwait has 8% of the world oil reserves, and Iran has a huge amount of oil reserves,
Yeah.
world oil reserves, and
Even with the Iran sanctions, the prices are coming down. We were.
So basically, as I'm explaining to you, that they have to maintain, because it is defined by what? It is defined by demand.
True.
If your demand was 114 million barrel a day, oil prices today would be 200 million dollar
True.
a day, barrel a day.
We
So,
saw 150. Yeah.
or one, whatever. But the fact is that because oil prices have been suppressed as a result of efficiencies, that is scientific, technological breakthroughs that we have got, and oil embargoes opened the eyes of everyone. And on the contrary, America used to be a big importer of oil. They used to import 60-70% of the oil. Today, America is self-sufficient in oil.
And that's
Can you
thanks to fracking, right?
And, not only
Technology.
fracking, but also
Efficiency, you know.
Other the vertical shafts that they've done, they were deep. They were able to get oil from the very deep wells, which were very inefficient before.
Oh, okay.
Technology has played a very big role in that. So America is now producing 11 billion barrel of oil per day, and it used to only 3 or 4 million back in the days.
Yeah.
So from 3 million to 11 million barrel a day. So they are not that needy of oil.
All right.
Then American strategic reserves are around 3 to 6 months strategic reserves. So when the strategic reserves, the Americans keep buying oil and keep putting them in salt mines, which are there in America for 3 to 6 months. So Americans are very sensitive towards oil, and they
Okay.
don't want their economy to severe shocks like in 1970. Since 1970s, they have established this huge salt
Okay. No, I didn't know that.
salt strategic reserves, and those strategic reserves,
Salt, like salt mines.
salt mines
Okay.
where they store the oil. And
Wow,
those
okay.
oil, that oil is only pumped in and never pumped out. Rarely they have taken out oil from there, and they store. So when strategic reserves start getting up, and so basically there's demand is not increasing the
Okay.
way it was expected to increase, and oil reserves have been increasing. So peak oil theory has actually failed. So
But it's a good news in a way. I mean, I would say.
good for the world. So peak oil theory has failed. So now oil prices are subject to political pressures of the world.
All right.
So now what happens that if there's a big political issue in the world, then oil becomes a problem. Strategy becomes a problem.
So we don't really lack oil, but it's now, yeah.
The oil we will never, oil age will end, as Zaki Ahmed Yamni used to say.
Yeah.
Oil age will end.
It's
like
not-
the Stone Age ended.
Yeah.
Basically, all this oil will not be utilized. And the Saudis realize it, the Kuwaitis realize it, everyone else realizes it. That oil they have in the ground
Yeah.
for next 100 or 120 years at the present consumption level may not be required because the technology is moving so fast.
But it's not for
Solar
tomorrow.
energy-
I mean, we can't really see the
but
change.
Not tomorrow, but nations who are totally dependent on single commodity,
Yeah.
they have to be very careful because they don't have multiple commodities
True.
to support their economy. What else OPEC has, like in the Gulf GCC countries, if oil is taken out of the equation, then then there's a serious problem. So for them, it is very important that there has to be a fine balance between how much they pump out, because they cannot keep too much oil in the ground also. So
True.
they have to they want to sell as much as possible.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, but they also realize that if they sell too much, the oil prices crash.
True.
Because it's very sensitive. If there's 1 million extra barrel of oil in the markets, the oil prices crash. It has to be just meeting the demand. Now, what has happened is Americans have come
Yeah.
up from 3 million to 11 million,
Yeah.
and the Russians have come up big time.
Okay.
And the gas has been playing a very major role. Qatar gas has come in, and then the Russian gas has come in, and all these power stations are converting into gas.
So Russia
And LNG is now playing a very very major role. So the world economy is becoming very much aware of the different sectors of hydrocarbons that they can play with, and as such, now you have to be very careful that oil is no more in the hands of OPEC players. It is now very much sensitive to what Russia thinks, and therefore Russia plays a very big role now
Okay.
in the OPEC, within the OPEC. It is a mediator between Iran
Mm-hmm.
and Saudi Arabia, for example. So the only political connection today between Saudi Arabia and Iran is OPEC, for example. And the Saudis have announced a think tank. Maybe demise of OPEC is very near. And a demise of OPEC will mean lower oil prices.
Really?
Because there will be a severe competition. At the
Mm.
moment, quotas,
Makes sense.
reduction,
Yeah.
keep the oil equal to 93 million barrel a day. We need
Yeah.
93 million barrel, there are 93 million barrel. If we have in the markets 100 million barrel every day,
Yeah.
you know that, then we have an issue. Because what happens, 7 million barrel creates enough of price pressures on the lower side, because then you are able to sell it for
Very
$5
cheap.
less or $6 less. So recently,
Yeah.
you have seen the oil coming down all of a sudden from $75 to 55
Yeah.
WTI. And you know, WTI is the American oil that is a standard. Brent is North Sea oil, and WTI is American. That's a standard taken. So it has come down. As a result, why it has come down so fast? Because political pressure applied, and taps were opened, and what happened recently in Turkey, Istanbul, as a result of that, there's a lot of political pressure that helped many people to get oil off $75, because inflationary $75 and $80 oil is very inflationary for United States of America, and they wanted the prices to come down, and to please the Americans, I think Saudis have agreed and have started pumping a little more, and therefore you can see that since Istanbul incident,
Yeah.
oil prices have been slowly
Coming
and
down, yeah.
gradually coming down. But it is also because of the fact that Russians are playing a very good role, and every oil dealer was long on oil in Iran, for example, because of the Iranian sanctions, the regime to be applied from 5th of November. Every dealer was thinking that oil prices will go higher.
True.
But now,
Everybody.
oil at $55,
I even bet.
if it breaks the $53 mark, it might go back to $40, because now all of a sudden they have an issue on hand, because Iranian sanctions have not really helped increase the price of the oil. It has helped decrease the price of the oil, because much more oil is being pumped, and as a result, you have seen these fluctuations can happen because the capacity is there to pump. Although Iraq is pumping much less, and Venezuelans have an issue. Venezuelan oil is not coming out. On
And
the
even
market.
Libyan side, there's a problem.
Libyan are doing much better now. Iraqis are doing much better. So then there is a lot more oil being discovered, and and the biggest problem with the oil is that when it goes at 55 above or 60 above, fracking becomes
Profitable,
very
yeah.
profitable. Because the cost of fracking is around for 55 to 60 to $65. So when it goes to 75 or $80, then all of a sudden a lot of oil comes in the market. And,
Okay.
And the fracking, this oil is a huge amount of oil available. Shale oil is all over the world.
Yeah.
So luckily for the oil consumers, it's a good break. Okay, and everybody is making a lot of money on that. Even France. Tomorrow you told me that there's a strike in Paris
Yep.
because of the fact that they charge so much duties on it.
Yep, we got
So,
new taxes, so-called pollution taxes
pollution
again.
taxes and all. So basically, so is in Pakistan the cost of oil is 40 rupees per liter. What it costs them, they're selling it 100, for example. So they make nearly 55 to 60 rupees in profits. So and Pakistan utilizes or imports around 450,000 barrels. 31st or 32nd country in the world in terms of importing oil. 450,000 barrel a day of oil Pakistan utilizes. So it's not very much, but like for example, America utilizes 19 to 21 million barrel a day. You see my point? So
Wow, that's huge. Really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
huge. Yeah. And India does 3 to 4 million barrel a day. I think 4.5 or 2 million barrel a day, India.
That's not much for a big country like that.
But that's not much, but it's 10 times more than an Indian economy is also quite rural economy. You know, say 50% of the population, Indian population lives in rural areas. So their carbon footprint is much lower.
And what about China?
China, I think, is around 14 million barrel,
Okay.
13 to 14 million barrel, but it produces a huge amount of GDP of the world after India, after China, America,
True.
which is American GDP is around $21 trillion. The Chinese is around also 14, 15 million trillion dollars.
Yeah.
So basically,
And they're still growing.
And growing. So, but they have taken a, don't forget, they have taken a weight of what they export is also, they help cut production in other countries, because what they export is naturally something that others don't make it in.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like toys, or for example shoes or apparels.
Oh yeah,
or
China. Everything is made in
everything
China.
is made. So basically, they also export labor. They also export commodities.
Yeah.
They also export naturally everything. So, the oil is a very interesting field underlying. But you see, in my theory, and what I prophesize and philosophize is that the reason we are global poverty exists, that 2-3 billion people live below the poverty line, and we have poverty in the world, I attribute it to two things.
Well,
And those two things are that if we have free energy and free water, fresh water,
Yeah.
then there'll be no
No
more
poverty.
poverty in the world. And like we have free air that we drink, we take free oxygen, we don't have to worry about it. We
True.
don't pay a tax to anyone. Imagine
and a
that,
nice view.
no, but imagine if we have to pay to breathe. So luckily, then how
True.
difficult it will be to live, right? Because the capitalists are people who own the oxygen will tax it as much as possible.
True.
So, in my personal opinion, the time in next 20-30 years, how global economy will change, and I think the benefits, we are at the cusp of, I always say, we are at the cusp of a great leap forward, and that is that very soon you will see that in 20 to 30 years, solar energy will be harnessed totally, and we will have a lot of water from desalinations,
Yeah.
and a lot of energy from solar energy.
Well, that sounds good. That sounds very
cells
optimistic.
Prices are, it is, and solar prices are going down, and we will be able to maybe have energy from fusion, which will not be very dangerous like fission, because in fusion half-life cycle is very tricky, and it can create a lot of all these